everyone, Laura Smith here from SLP Mommy of Apraxia, and today I'm excited to have Dr. Priscila, that's what I'm calling her. She can introduce her full name though, on with me today to talk about developmental coordination disorder and kind of her research. We can pick her brain a little bit, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her current research studies. So welcome.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited we connected and we can talk about DCD. You know, I am a researcher in DCD, but I have always been passionate about this connection between really the research, the mechanisms, understanding the condition, but also, you know, the real life of a child with DCD and the families experiencing DCD. So this is so beneficial to me because I want this practice to inform my research. But got ahead of myself. So my name is Priscila Tamplain, and I'm a researcher in DCD. I got a PhD in motor development, and then I specialize in DCD. I've always been interested in that. You know, the idea of a disorder of motor development. And I started doing research in 2012. So it's been, 8 years now. I'm currently the U.S. representative in the International Society for Research in DCD. So I have been doing this for a while, and I understand what's, where we are in the research world with DCD. And yes, I have a new study that we can talk about a little bit later.
Yeah. So just so my listeners know, we kind of connected because I was researching DCD the other day, and I came across an article that was recent that said approximately 1 in 20 children could potentially have, a version of DCD, and that number is so high. And so, I don't know, you'll have to speak to whether that number is correct. I'll let you weigh in on that. But I did end up posting a graphic on my social media that said, childhood apraxia speech, which is, what my account normally focuses on, is about 1 to 2 for every 1,000 kids. So relatively rare, but that figure seems so high. And there can be a lot of people who have a child with apraxia of speech report motor planning issues in other parts of the body, aka DCD or dyspraxia. So I just thought that I needed to get that information out there because parents need to be potentially looking for this, as well as speech therapists, because a lot of times the first thing that kind of tends to show itself that parents are concerned about might be speech. So if speech therapists realize that this could be as prevalent as it potentially is, we can be kind of the first gatekeeper to send them and refer them potentially on to get something, get other needs that there could be. So anyway.
Sure. And I didn't tell you this, but we're going full circle here because I started talking about DCD to professionals and families when the Brazilian organization on apraxia of speech,
oh yes,
you spoke to their conference. That's how I started following you. I gave a talk to them 2 years ago. And of course, I am Brazilian. I've been living in the US and in research in the US, but I am Brazilian. I went there and talked about DCD because they said, you know what, we need to talk about this. All of our parents are talking about motor problems. So they're talking about, and then saw your talk for them, then started following you, then saw you posted on DCD. And now I have a specific workshop for speech therapists that work with apraxia of speech about DCD, because you're so right. It's something that parents see much earlier on, and it's something that it might be addressed, but parents still see other problems, and we see this all the time that maybe the child's a little bit clumsy, but they don't know what it is, or they speech may be more important at that time. But I think the role of the speech therapist, pathologist in there is super important to help parents navigate, could this be a true motor problem? Could this be a delay and things like that?
Yeah. A lot of times in my daughter's case, she was severe enough where OT and PT kind of picked her up right away, but there can be varying severities, correct?
Yes, in DCD, yes, I would say so. And there's no there's no specific diagnosis for severity. So we talk about that more from a clinical perspective, right? So
Okay, sure.
see more a child is. So there wouldn't be a diagnosis on the severity, but it's very good to think about that from that term, from that idea, because DCD can affect 1, 2, or 3 areas of motor coordination. It can affect a child more depending on the activities that they choose to do. It certainly affects school achievement, so that depends a lot on the school environment. So yeah, there's definitely different ways that DCD will show up and also affect a child's life.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up is that a lot of times parents report to me that, they have gotten their child tested, say through a public entity like Child Find or the public school system, and they didn't qualify. But if they, if I do refer them to a private practice, they have found like, some delays and things that, really show that there is DCD going on. And that gets back to this medical model versus educational model. I just know from working in the schools, to qualify someone educationally, we have to show that there is some sort of educational impact, within a certain percentage of delay or whatever. And so a lot of times those kids won't qualify in the schools, but do actually have something going on. So I always, luckily in private practice, I can refer, but the school districts really, they really discourage their employees from referring to private clinicians. So another reason why I wanted to just throw that in there, that there could be different severities. Just so everyone knows, she does have a talk. It's still up. I just rewatched it last night on Apraxia Kids. So you had talked to Apraxia Kids over the summer and did a talk on DCD for them. And that's up on their website. So I encourage anyone to go check that out too. It was a great hour-long kind of overview. So really good.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get into, this is a question, I'll just give you some questions that I get asked all the time. Okay. What is the difference between dyspraxia and developmental coordination disorder?
Right, that is the question that people ask me all the time too.
Yes.
And I actually wrote a post for Understood about that.
Oh, awesome. Yes,
Because
she's talking, understood.org, just to throw that in there, is what she's referring to. So yes,
right,
go ahead.
and we have a great section on developmental coordination disorder, and it's all scientific, it's reviewed by professionals, and I reviewed their DCD portion. But so let's think about this. So in general, I think when people talk about dyspraxia, they are referring to the same thing as DCD. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Developmental coordination disorder is a formal term, right? And it is the term that we see on the DSM-5, so the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. So when a diagnosis would say DCD, developmental coordination disorder, in there. I think, and this is just a thought, right? It's just an opinion, that dyspraxia was a term that was used for a long time, or has been used for a long time. And it's really a term that kind of defines the type of movement, right? So the dyspraxic movement. So it's a little bit slower, a little bit more varied, a little bit less coordinated, so less accurate. And so it kind of almost became a term that you could put everything together and call it dyspraxia. I also think it's a simpler, shorter, more straightforward term. So it's easier for parents to refer to that. But it's not, to my knowledge, a formal diagnosis. It's not on the DSM. It is actually mentioned on the international classification. And it's either developmental coordination disorder or developmental dyspraxia. So it is there. The US follows the DSM, right? But there is on the International Classification of Diseases, it is in there, just so you know. So I think people are referring to the same thing. That's my understanding of it. And, in a way, I think it's easier for parents to say dyspraxia. I really dislike the term developmental coordination disorder, because it implies that it goes away, right? That there's developmental, and it doesn't. And a lot of people don't know what coordination is, and disorder implies that there is something completely wrong that maybe can't be fixed or can be improved. And so it's really, a lot of people will say to me, instead of DCD, CDC, because it doesn't even make sense, right? It's also weird. Um, so a lot of people will say dyspraxia because of that. Now, I do, with the parents that I see that come to my lab for research, to my intervention program, is I ask that they stick to the term DCD for insurance purposes, when they talk to the pediatrician, in the school system. And the reason is because that's where the credibility is, right? That's when, somebody in the schools, and you mentioned that, if you go and say DCD, they're like, oh, that's not important. That doesn't do anything. That's not a disorder of cognition, right? Or anything that they think might affect school performance. But they go and Google it, and it's there. It's in the DSM. So that helps us bring more credibility to the condition and to request services. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fabulous. I think you mentioned that is exactly, I actually didn't realize that developmental coordination disorder until I watched your talk this summer was in the DSM-5, and that's why it's the more formal one to use. But definitely for purposes of writing, I just always say dyspraxia, because it's just easier to write. If I write DCD, no one knows what I'm talking about. So you really do have to write developmental coordination disorder to get your point across. Yeah. And then dyspraxia just becomes easier. The other reason I do it, or have done it in the past, is because, there really isn't like a, like for apraxia, we have the American Speech Language Hearing Association that has officially recognized apraxia as a disorder. And so we can go there and get information from there. If you're looking for an entity like that in, the United States for developmental coordination disorder, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like we have something like that.
No.
Right.
No, yeah, and you're very right about that. And so not having that organization really helps things get a little complicated when it comes to DCD. And unfortunately, because like you mentioned, DCD is way more prevalent than apraxia, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So when when average parent, like all of us know we shouldn't do, but do anyways, go to Google, what we tend to find is the UK Dyspraxia Foundation. Right. And we're like, yep, that fits my kid. That's dyspraxia. UK seems to be ahead of everything in this, and, kind of end of story. So yeah. I think that's another reason.
Yeah. And I'm torn about that, Laura, because as a researcher, I want the formal term to be used. Some people will say to me, oh, there's not a lot of research on this. There is a lot of research on this, but it will use the formal term. And I want recognition for DCD. That's what I want. I want it to be just like autism, that when somebody mentions autism, it's like, oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what I want for DCD. So the formal term helps with that. But but that's so easy for me to speak, to say this from my little desk, with my papers, and not be talking to a family and to children that may prefer the term, and that's okay for them.
Yeah, I do feel like a lot of, there are quite a few blogs in the UK that have adults now who blog, and they refer to themselves as dyspraxic, and that's how they refer to have themselves referenced. So you can't really, it's same with people with autism. Some people just want you to say that they are autistic and not a person with autism, because they do identify that so strongly with a piece of themselves. So developmental coordination disorder doesn't give them that option to say, dyspraxic, autistic.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but anyway, as long as we know we're talking about the same thing for the purposes of today, you're doing such great things. You have here in your definition that it affects 5 to 6% of the children, which is still high.
It is. It's what the DSM says, right? So the American Psychological Association. So, and there's some other estimates from 2 to 7%. So it ranges a little bit. We don't know for sure. There are so many kids that potentially, most kids still go undiagnosed. They may have a diagnosis of maybe motor problems or get some therapy for that, but it's very rare still to have the formal diagnosis right present. Um, so yes, and I think, I think in 2013, I did estimate to be almost 5 million children in the US, school-age children in the US, just based on that percentage and the number of kids enrolled in school. But I think that would amount to about, definitely 1 in 20, which if you
Yeah.
compare to a disorder like, and I'll just, I don't want to focus on that. I'm just going to bring up autism because
Yeah.
it is so well known.
Yeah.
And it's what, is it 1 in 58 now? I think
It's either between
58 and
48 and 58, something like that.
right.
Yeah.
And when you think about 1 in 20, that is huge.
It's huge.
That is so much more prevalent. And if anything, it has such effect on school performance, especially. But it's not something that visible, right? So
Yeah.
when we think about motor, the motor system is the baseline of everything we do. You know that
Hmm.
too.
Absolutely.
And if we have something not quite working well in there, it will affect the lower levels and the higher level activities. So, a child is not sitting properly we think that they're being fidgety, and it's not. It's because they can't control their posture, but that will affect their attention. That will affect their ability to write and copy something. And we just keep going on that circle. But very few people look at the motor system as the cause of problems.
Yep.
But it is prevalent.
Yes. So, I want to just go back a minute to talk about, how it goes underdiagnosed a lot of times. And this is another, not necessarily criticism, but thing that I've noticed with, going through this with my daughter is another big question I get asked is, who do I go to? Who diagnoses this? And,
Sure.
From my own experience, I finally figured out, I mean, they don't tell you, even as a professional, I did not realize there was a difference between developmental pediatricians and your regular pediatrician. Developmental pediatrician just seemed like, well, yeah, like a pediatrician, but they're different, right? And so a lot of people have gotten their diagnosis from a developmental pediatrician. I got my diagnosis for my daughter through an OT. Other people have told me on my page they've gotten it through a neurologist. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell you people have gone to the neurology department here in Denver at Children's, and none of them diagnose it. And in fact, one of them told one of my clients, what do I look like, a therapist, giving her the impression that she should be getting the diagnosis from a therapist and not the developmental pediatrician. It seems a mess. So how do we fix this? Who diagnoses this? Who do we tell people to go to?
It is, and I think it is a mess. And I, you know, honestly, I think it is a mess for every condition in general,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I only started really feeling how hard it is for parents when I had a child that was having a speech delay. And people were telling me it wasn't a real delay, but I knew something was up, and I had to go
Mm-hmm.
and start asking. And I was lost. And Laura, I'm saying this, and I am a researcher. I have, some ways to maybe look up to understand a little bit more some of the
Sure.
scientific terms. And it was really hard for me. So I
Yes.
can imagine, I feel so much for families navigating this world, because it is a mess, it is crazy, and it's not designed to help them.
Yeah.
With DCD, unfortunately, I think it's being more, with this being very largely undiagnosed, and with the issues not being very clear, and the diagnosis only really happening later on in life. So typically a professional would wait until 4 or 5 to diagnose DCD, to make sure that the motor delays are just not delays for lack of a stimulation, and the child gets caught up. But in general, I would say OTs are great for that. A lot of people now have been, but the new reports is that pediatricians are understanding a little bit more about it. So while they might not diagnose it, they might be able to refer to an OT or developmental pediatrician. But there's no clear answer on that,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, which is another reason I feel like if I can get this information out to SLPs, SLPs might be able to help, and I think they absolutely can help a family navigate where to go, because I know they can because I do it. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
kind of figured out what works in my state. Don't go to neurology, go to a developmental ped. That list is 2 years long. If you can't go to that, go to this, OT,
yeah.
and,
I'll even say sometimes just maybe try if you find studies. So, me as a researcher in my lab will do a few assessments, and I'm not qualified to diagnose anything, but I can give a report on some of these assessments, and that may help the family bring that to a pediatrician or an OT and say, these are the assessments, and the researcher told me that maybe this could look like this. What do you think? So
yeah,
there are different ways to go about it, and that's not a good thing, right? So we wish there was a
right.
very specific pathway for diagnosis. Um, but I think with knowledge, I'll say this: I talked to um, pediatricians and at John Hopkins 2 years ago. I went and gave their seminar, and I talked about DCD, and there were hundreds of pediatricians in the room, and a lot of them had heard about DCD. They were not very clear on what that was, but they have heard about it. So I'm assuming this is going to get better and better. I'm an
Yeah,
optimistic, so
yeah, absolutely.
I think we'll get there.
Yes, yes, I do too. And that's why I'm really, as you are passionate about awareness, kind of you're doing this for free. I'm not paying you to do this. And it's because this is how much you care, obviously, or you wouldn't do this. And this is how much you want it out there, just like I do. So, just thank you so much. Um, okay, so let's go into, oh, you know what? I just wanted to add one more thing. On the Apraxia Kids Talk, you get, and I didn't print it out yet. I have it pulled up on my computer, but it's a survey that a professional can go to, as you said, if you can maybe just even a speech pathologist, just gather information and tell the parent, take this to another professional. Can you tell us, I don't have it up right now with me, what that website was or what
Sure.
that, yeah.
That's funny you say the Praxis Kids talk, and that was in July of
Yes.
last year, and it feels like it was a lifetime ago. It's
Lots have
never
happened in the world. Yes.
um, I talked a little bit about I think my research on it. I started a research study where we were looking at kids with apraxia speech and looking at DCD characteristics. So we're in unfortunately, right, it was a in-person study, and we haven't been able to
Yeah.
to restart it yet. But I think that's what it was.
Let me see. Hold on. I'm just gonna divert real quick. And oh, I had to restart my computer. I had it pulled up. No, that wasn't it. It was like a survey, and I meant to print it out, like that you could go through as a questionnaire. It not maybe I'm using the wrong word. It was a questionnaire that a professional could take a parent through. Like, does your kid have problems with this? Does
Oh,
your kid have,
yes. Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry. I also have a mommy brain. So
Yes, everyone, for everyone out there, she's got
oh
a
my gosh.
5-month-old baby. So we all
Yes.
know mommy brain.
Oh, so yes, so there is a questionnaire called Developmental Coordination Disorder Questionnaire, and it
Yes.
is available. So you can go, if you Google just that, it will take you to that, and it's a PDF that you get from a website called Kid Child, and it is a standardized assessment. So you can look, there's 15 questions on 3 areas. So fine motor control, there is balance, there's some general coordination in there, and it is just a screening, but it
Yeah.
is a great way to look at it and look at the results and say, this might possibly be DCD or close to DCD, or this is probably not DCD. And it is for parents, yeah, parents, teachers. So it's available, it's free. So it is a great tool for parents and for professionals to help them maybe make a case for motor problems, right? So if they're trying to talk about this with a parent and the parent is confused, have them answer the survey, and they will see how maybe their kid might not be might not be as coordinated as other children their age.
Yeah, I love that. So I just wanted to make sure I threw that in there because I felt that was such a great tool and it's quick, and I want
Yeah,
people to be aware
I
of
don't
that.
know if you can do that. You probably can do that later, right, Laura? Just share the link.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'll put it in and when I put this on YouTube too, and
Okay.
I'll have it there because I really do think that's so valuable. So that leads into, you were talking about how there could be three, potentially different areas that DCD could affect. And I hear this question all the time too, or I'll get this comment. I might have a family say, "Oh, my kid is awesome at soccer. They're great at basketball. Like, definitely, they don't have any problems. But, we're not crossing midline. We're having handwriting issues. It's showing up more in fine motor." Or the converse might be true. I have someone tell me their child is an amazing, artist. They're perfect at coloring. They stay in the lines, but yet the kid is clumsy. They're falling out of their chair. Down went out. Teachers think that it's a behavior, and in fact, it's more that balance and stuff. Like, even though they have great fine motor. So, can you talk about how it can manifest in different ways?
Sure. About a month ago, I talked about this on a podcast, and it was a woman asking why am I so clumsy? And the podcast was about, well, let's figure out why a person is clumsy. And obviously I came in to talk about DCD. And so in the interesting thing is that they had another person in there that he was a card stacker, and then so a person that would do some very fine motor skills for competitions of that. And this person said that I'm so clumsy. This is the only thing I can do well. And I do
Wow.
well because I practice a lot, right? So that is very common that especially in when it comes to DCD is. So when we think about DCD, so let's think about this. It's a disorder of motor proficiency. So it's children that have poor motor proficiency in 1, 2, or 3 areas. So we'll talk about manual dexterity or fine motor skills, balance, okay, so postural control, and aiming and catching or visual motor skills. So, throwing, catching. Now, it's very possible that you would see this as more prominent in one of these areas or maybe 2 of these areas, and one of the areas would be very well developed. Now, how do you develop just one area? It's really just practice, right? When you don't have a set of skills or just the baseline for 1 or 2 areas, you may actually figure out that you do well in one area and you just stick to that. We forget that we learn motor skills because of practice. Now, kids with DCD do have trouble learning skills because it's not just about practice. But if they do stick to one skill, and I think there's something to say about the power of practice in there. We also forget that motor skills, motor milestones, activities of daily living are largely influenced by family systems. So, for example, if I have a 4-year-old. So if I go to his little preschool room now, there will be a bunch of them that don't know how to put their clothes on. It's a very advanced motor skill process, right? So putting clothes on, using zippers, jackets, and all, maybe putting shoes on, maybe even starting to tie shoes. But that doesn't mean that they have DCD or they're clumsy. It's because the family is always doing it for them, so they don't have to do it. So maybe if there is one skill that the family is always stimulating from a very young age, that then they're getting really good at it. And all the things that they're not being stimulated on with DCD, then you see the real difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to kind of speak to, that we do have these different profiles, and yes, it can be influenced by your environment or what the child chooses to consistently practice and stick to, because they're finding more success with it. So,
well, it's so easy for us to think about a disorder and think about a homogeneous group of, right? So
yes.
it's this behaviors, and And you know, because of Ashley, that every child is different when they have a, you know, even when they have a diagnosis, they can still show it in very different ways. They can,
Totally.
you know, it's such a complex world because of that, right?
Yes.
So we have the core symptoms, but yes, you know, we'll see different ways that this is really displayed.
So I recently gave a talk to the Hawaiian Speech Hearing Association, and I was talking with someone on their board who was saying that she was having a difficult time getting parents to understand, like she was seeing motor in coordination with the kids, and she has some kids with apraxia. And she was saying that I see, you know, let's say I'm teaching them sign, and the signs are just not refined. Like they're not even able to do these refined movements for like more versus ball, right? Because this is a refined difference.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, we're doing wheels on the bus and it's here and it's disjointed. And she's like, it's just not smooth. But her barrier, she said, was convincing the parents that, yeah, like the parents might in some cases acknowledge, yeah, my kid's uncoordinated, but they wouldn't go seek extra help. So what would you say to convince, you know, if you're a professional and you know that you want to get the child some help with this and that they should get help, what is your kind of elevator speech?
Oh yeah, well, we forget that the motor system is very important to everything we do. So I think it's reminding people, reminding families of how having good motor skills will affect everything else in life. So we need good motor skills in order to eat properly, and we need good motor skills to walk and not fall all the time. You know, we forget that because we do it so well because we've practiced for so long. But we need also good motor skills for writing. We need great motor skills for driving. If you're not able to coordinate, you know, when you push the pedal and when you know, step on the brake, and when, you know, back in the day when you had to shift gears, this is all good motor skills, and not having that can affect daily living, can affect how a person might function in society. So even though it's not as visible, it is actually really important. So that's what I would say. And I think when it's clear that, you know, and maybe by age 4, that might not be as clear, but as soon as the child starts in the school system, then all these demands of the motor system come up, right? So it's actually organizing a backpack, and you know, maybe not letting things fall, and sitting properly while, you know, holding a paper stable, while copying letters, and walking around and not bumping into other kids. When all those demands come into place, then, and if there's a problem there, we see how important these motor skills are.
I love that. That was awesome. You said it way better than I could ever. I'm not even going to be able to replicate that. That's exactly it. It's like we all know the importance, but being able to explain to parents why, I think, at least for this other lady and I, we were talking about how difficult it is, but that
You
is
know how it
perfect.
is, because we think about motor skills uh, as, you know, motor performance as good motor performance as Olympic level of performance, right? Or
Yeah,
that swimmer,
yeah,
that, you know, player, that, you know, that ballerina, and we think this is great motor skills. And no, we have great motor skills.
yeah,
We have wonderful motor skills, right? We're able
yeah.
to pick up, you know, to do fine motor skills all the time, that allow us to actually live in the world and interact with objects and people, and not fall and not bump into things. And, you know, so another example that I use is, you know, we're able to pick up a cup of coffee, and we're able to adjust the force without even looking at it,
Yeah,
into your mouth without thinking.
yeah.
That is amazing. That's a very highly coordinated, complex motor skill.
I definitely never thought about it that way. Like I never had any balance or coordination issues. I was pretty what people would consider athletic when I was in school.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely having someone who has motor coordination issues, you realize what I realized is motor coordination affects every everything you do. Everything you go to do is some sort of motor planning, you know, and it's just, it became so, you know, she's pretty impacted, but it just became so much more obvious having a daughter, when I saw how it can impact. So yes. All right. Moving right along. Let's see, have a current study. So let's talk about
Yeah,
what your current
I feel
endeavors
like
are.
we could be talking for hours about all this.
Oh, we totally could.
Um, yeah, so so like I said before, I am a researcher, and I just felt when I started working with these kids, parents would ask me, what do I do? There's no program, there's nothing, people don't even know what DCD is. What do I do? So I created an intervention program in my university. So we have kids coming in every week, which is wonderful. And we're going to start a virtual program now very soon.
Oh, wow.
Which I'll hopefully be sharing with you soon too. But, I just fell in love with these kids. They are amazing. They are amazing. And the families too. And so working with them in the community every week, people asking me, why is it that we don't know more about it if it's so prevalent? Why is it that it's so hard? I just wanted to get more and more into that, that idea that we need to do more. And the only way I know how to do things, Laura, is from, my background and training, is we have to document it first in a very efficient, systematic way. So I've been wanting to do this for a while, and then I was talking to colleagues in Australia. They have a great a group for DCD in Australia, and they launched a study called Impact for DCD. And they were able to, their goal was to identify challenges, right, associated with DCD and for families. And they really wanted to identify these areas and use that as a way to start advocating for change. And I talked to them and I was like, I want to do something just like this in the US. I've been thinking about this. What a great name for a study.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, and as we were discussing this, I was like, well, why don't we get this study and do the same study in the USA and figure out what are the challenges here, and we can even compare later. We can use almost a broader study. And I said, oh, that's great. And so this already happened in Australia. It's currently happening in Canada, and I just launched this study here. So the Impact for DCD USA is a survey for families, right? So for parents of children between ages 6 to 18 years of age that have DCD, dyspraxia, or movement difficulties. So technically, we don't need a formal diagnosis since it's that hard to get. So we can understand a little bit, what are the diagnoses, what are the problems, what are the therapies, what are the challenges, what is the educational system, how long is it taking parents to get help if help is needed. And I think this is a great way to actually compile information so we can understand what's going on. And I would very much like to publish this, findings, and then use that as a way to, okay, this is the state of art, this is where we are. And this is where they are in Australia, this is where they are in Canada, this is where we are in the US. What can we do with this?
Yeah, I love it.
And so this is the study. It's a simple survey. It
was, and I took it, and I can agree to that.
Right, it's about 30 minutes. In Australia, by the way, the report has been published, so it's great to know.
Great.
I don't know if I told you this, but childhood apraxia of speech is one of the most common comorbidities.
Wow, no way.
I've never seen that. This is something, so knowing this based on answers from real families. So they had almost 500 participants. So
wow.
We are bigger, so the US is a little bit bigger. So I'm thinking maybe we can even go, and get more participants than that, because I think maybe, it isn't such a huge amount of work, right, that we need to do. And I do just a little bit of it. You do a lot of it as a parent. So we're just trying to, bring like little pieces here and there to help people understand what it is and to ultimately help their children.
Yeah.
But maybe it's time that we think about unifying some of these efforts, and like I said, I think this is the first way to go about this, is to document all these challenges. So that's
And I love how, oh, sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say, I love how you're coordinating with, Australia and Canada, because I do feel like, as I mentioned before, there's not really a source that parents can go to. Like I can send my parents who have children with childhood apraxia speech to the American Speech Language Hearing Association or to Apraxia Kids and know that they're going to be getting credible research-based information. I mean, there's just not really, although you have got understood.org, which you are a contributor to. So that's wonderful. And then I Can Child, is that the other resource? Did
Yeah,
I get that right?
I will say this. I think Understood and Can Child are the very best,
Okay.
especially for us, right, being in the US and
Yeah.
Canada being close enough. I think Americans do like to see something that comes from here, right? So
Yeah.
it's Understood
Yeah.
American base. So I think
Yeah.
it gives credibility to the condition too. Movement Matters in the UK is very good as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do have, probably just like you, I don't know you very well, but I think you're just like me, that we think about this. Maybe one day this is something I could do, maybe in 10 years when I
Yes.
would love to do something like this. And maybe we're all starting to meet people that can come together and one day come up with an organization, right? Because it will take, like
Yeah.
10 people to get started.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe that this is one way, if I
Yeah.
get comments saying I want to be more involved in this, like, well, then, we can, I'll count you in.
Yeah.
This is the impact for DCD USA. It's a simple survey. I sent you the link, and, there are a few flyers, and what I would love to do is just see if people can answer that. And I know it's a lot to ask. I know people are really busy. And what I can offer is any way that I can help support the children involved. This is one thing I can do, is by doing research and elevating the research in the field and sharing this research. And I can also, share what I can. I can talk to anybody that needs it, right? So I'm also here saying that I would love if parents can fill out the survey and share the survey. And I am here to support the community in any way that it's needed.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's going to take, is all of us have a common goal, including parents who see movement disorders in children, therapists who see movement disorders in children, knowing that we want to get them the help that they need. Everyone can only do what they can do. So as a researcher, you play such a valuable role. Having my social media, I feel like I can disseminate information to people who potentially could be interested. And then it takes the people who potentially could be interested in just filling out the survey. So I think actually I got a great response. I posted it last Friday. I don't even know if you've been in your lab yet, but you have to at least have 10 or 15 more surveys done. I just know it based on the response I got, and everyone asking, all the people asking me to send them the link. So
Okay, that's great.
fingers crossed. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't checked yet because I'm so, this is so dear to my heart that I'm like, I just, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to post it again. I'll definitely post this video, on all my social media accounts to get the word out some more. And where can they find you? And I'll have your email address. You've been very responsive, according to people who have already told me that they've spoken to you via email. Do you have any social media they can find you on?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. That's how we met. I love that. I love that. I'll never
I
get
know.
when my
Yeah.
husband is giving me a hard time for, what are you doing on Instagram? It's like, Instagram is a tool that helps
Yes.
connect. So I am on Instagram. I'm not sure what my name is on Instagram. Maybe I can share this with you later.
Yeah, please do, and I'll put it in.
Right. So let's do that. Email is definitely the easiest way. I also have a Facebook page. So my lab has a Facebook page where we advertise a lot of the activities that we do with the Little Mavs Movement program, which is where the kids come and do activities of students at the university. And that's the DMC lab. Sorry. So I can send that to you too. And I post a lot of things in there, a lot of articles, a lot of talks. The podcast I mentioned is posted there. So just a way to interact with parents too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. I have a feeling we're going to be in contact more.
Yeah,
And,
I
I
will.
just appreciate you coming on. Any last words?
Thank you for having me here. Thank you for helping share the survey, and just anything you need, whatever I can do. Researchers are not this people, in the ivory tower, just some of them maybe, not all of them are. I genuinely, and I know a lot of people like me that just really wants to connect and help and find a way to serve these kids and this family. So I love to talk to parents. So please contact me. Love to serve in any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.